Before you listen to this story, let me warn you, winter is not as quiet as you think. Some things in the snow are shaped by our hands, and some reshape themselves during the night. If you've ever built a snowman, you might regret pressing play. I used to love winter more than any other season, especially the first heavy snowfall that covered everything in a thick, silent blanket of white, muting the world until even your own footsteps sounded distant. When I was a kid, I would rush outside to build snowmen before the snow could be spoiled by car tracks or footprints, shaping their bodies by hand until my gloves were soaked and my fingers numb. But that all changed the year I built a snowman that should never have existed. The year I learned that some shapes in the snow can attract things you don't ever want noticing you. My family lived on the outskirts of a rural town where winter storms could isolate you for days. Our house sat alone in a wide open field that made the perfect canvas for building snowmen. My father used to help me roll the huge snowballs, stacking them into towering figures that leaned slightly in the wind. Their pebble eyes and stick arms crooked like they were trying to move when no one was watching. But when I was 12, he left without a word, and winter wasn't the same after that. My mother withdrew into herself, the house grew quieter, and I spent more time alone outside trying to feel something like the joy I used to. That year, the first snowfall came early and heavier than any I'd seen, drifting up past the porch steps, turning the world into a blank, featureless expanse. Since my mother had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still on, I slipped outside bundled in my old coat and scarf, determined to build a snowman by myself for the first time. The field behind our house felt enormous and empty, the kind of quiet that makes your breath sound too loud. But I welcomed the loneliness because it was better than the silence inside. I began rolling the base, pushing it through the fresh powder until it grew so big I had to struggle to move it. As I worked, I felt the odd sensation that something was watching me from the tree line far behind our house, though the woods were swallowed in shadow and snowfall. I told myself it was just the strange acoustics of winter, how cold air can twist silence into the illusion of presence, and I kept building. When I finished, the snowman stood taller than me, its lopsided head tilting forward as if studying me. I remember laughing because it looked almost alive in a strange, awkward way. I used stones for its eyes, a split branch for its mouth, and 2 long sticks for arms that stretched out like it was reaching for something, maybe even reaching for me. I was proud of it, proud that I had done it alone. As the daylight dimmed, I headed inside without looking back, leaving the snowman standing alone in the field like a silent guardian. But that night, as the wind howled and the house creaked with the settling cold, I woke to the faintest sound, something soft brushing against the siding outside my bedroom wall, almost like a dragging. I sat up in bed listening, holding my breath, and after a long moment of stillness I convinced myself it was just branches scraping in the wind. The next morning the weather had calmed, the sky painfully bright. When I looked outside I stopped breathing for a moment because the snowman I had built, my snowman, was no longer where I left it. Instead of standing in the middle of the field, it was now much closer, positioned about halfway between the house and its original spot, as if it had been moved during the night. At first I thought maybe heavy wind had rolled it somehow, but the perfectly round base was intact, untouched, and the snow around it wasn't disturbed the way it would be if someone had pushed it. It looked like it had simply relocated. I asked my mother if she had moved it, but she barely looked up from her coffee and muttered that she hadn't gone outside. I tried to laugh it off, but something in my stomach twisted with unease. That night I couldn't sleep, not really. I lay awake listening to every gust, every settling pop of the house, but eventually exhaustion took me. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I jolted awake to a noise outside my window, a faint crunching sound in the snow, slow and heavy, like the sound of deep footprints being made one at a time. I didn't have the courage to look out the window. Instead, I pulled the blankets over my face and prayed it was an animal, though nothing moved that slowly. By morning, when sunlight filtered through the frost on my window, I forced myself to look outside. My heart dropped into my stomach. The snowman was now directly at the edge of the porch, standing just a few feet from the front steps. I could see every detail of its stone eyes and crooked smile as clearly as if someone had carved new features overnight. The stones were pushed deeper, the mouth stretched wider, and the stick arms angled slightly forward, almost welcoming. But the worst part wasn't its new position, it was the trail behind it. A continuous, perfectly straight groove in the snow stretched from where it had been the day before, all the way to where it now stood, as if it had dragged itself across the field. I ran inside and begged my mother to come look, but by the time she stumbled out of bed, the sun had warmed the snow just enough that the trail had softened, the groove fading under the glare, and the snowman looked harmless again. She told me I was just spooking myself and to stop making things up, but I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. Over the next day I tried to stay calm, pretending nothing was wrong, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. When night fell again, my anxiety grew into something sharp and claustrophobic, and every time the house creaked I felt myself flinch. Around midnight I heard it again, the crunch, crunch, crunch of something moving slowly through deep snow, deliberate, heavy. This time I crawled to the window on shaking limbs and lifted the bottom of the curtain just enough to peek outside. My breath fogged the glass instantly, but through the gap I saw a shape at the base of the porch step stall, round, slouched slightly forward. The snowman. And though it didn't move while I watched, I had the unmistakable sensation that it knew I was looking, that it was waiting for something. I saw something else too. The left stick arm, which earlier had been angled upward, was now pressed against the wooden porch railing like a hand on a banister. I stumbled back from the window, tears in my eyes, and locked my bedroom door even though I knew a lock meant nothing to whatever could move without leaving real footprints. I didn't sleep at all, sitting with my back against the wall until dawn tinted the sky gray. The moment my mother left for work, I forced myself to go outside to see what the snowman looked like in daylight, because a small part of me still clung to the possibility that I was losing my mind. But when I stepped onto the porch, the air froze in my lungs. The snowman was no longer on the steps. Instead, it stood directly below my bedroom window, its head tilted up toward it as if it had been watching me all night. The snow beneath it was disturbed, not with prints but with something like drag marks, as though its entire body had shifted forward repeatedly. Even worse, its mouth was different again. The stones had been rearranged into a longer, jagged grin that stretched too wide. I ran back inside and refused to leave my room for hours. When evening fell again, I begged my mother to stay in my room with me, but she brushed me off, saying she had to finish paperwork and that I needed sleep. That night the sounds came earlier, the crunch of snow, the scrape of wood, a low, almost inaudible thud against the siding beneath my window. I pressed my hands to my ears, rocking back and forth, but I could still feel the vibrations through the floorboards, the wall, the air. And then, at some point, everything went silent. Hours passed without a noise, and despite my terror, exhaustion finally dragged me into restless sleep. When I woke, sunlight streaming through the curtains, I felt the dread before I even remembered why. I rose slowly, my legs trembling, and approached the window. When I looked outside, my breath caught. The snowman was gone, completely gone. No base, no midsection, no head, no sticks, no stones. Just an empty patch of snow that looked oddly compacted, like something had melted or collapsed there, but the temperature overnight had been well below freezing. I should have felt relief, but instead a chill crawled up my spine because the snow beneath my window was disturbed in another way. It was scooped out, hollowed like something had crouched there for hours. My mother never believed me when I told her, and she dismissed the entire incident as childish imagination, but I know what I saw. And I know what followed. For weeks afterward I heard noises at night, soft tapping at the walls, gentle brushing at the windows, but when I dared to look, nothing was there. Yet the feeling persisted, the sense that something was watching, waiting, learning. Winter eventually ended, and the noises stopped, but the fear never fully left. As I grew older, I refused to build another snowman, refused to shape anything vaguely human out of snow, because a part of me believes that making that shape again would invite it back, whatever it was. And now, as I sit in my apartment, far from that childhood home, far from the field and the woods I shake the dread curling in my stomach because the forecast tonight calls for the first real snowfall of the year. Heavy, silent, perfect for building. And I swear, as I walked up the stairs earlier, I saw something wet on my welcome mat. Not meltwater, not slush. Something that looked like three small, perfectly round droplets, spaced like the trailing edge of a snowball, dragged across a floor. That's why I don't build snowmen anymore. And why you shouldn't either, because sometimes, when you give a shape to the snow, something inside it wakes up. If this story made you glance at the window, or think twice about the snow outside, don't leave yet. Like the video to keep the darkness from getting closer. Subscribe so you're never alone in the cold, and watch another story on the channel. Stopping now is when the winter things begin to move.